The hum of the cabin was low, polished, and expensive, the kind of quiet that only comes with private jets. The aircraft, a custom Gulfstream G700, gleamed under the morning sun at Manila International Airport. Everything about it whispered luxury. Everything, except the tension about to unfold. Manny Pacquiao boarded with his usual calm smile. Dressed simply, a white polo, jeans, and a cap, he didn't look like one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. His assistant followed, carrying a leather duffel and a folder of travel documents. It was a routine charter flight to Los Angeles, privately booked under a company called Solara Aviation Group. What Manny didn't know was that the woman who owned Solara Aviation would soon change the tone of this entire morning. The flight attendant, Kayla, stood at the door, perfectly pressed uniform, practiced smile. But when she saw Manny, her smile faltered for half a second, just long enough to show judgment. "Excuse me, sir," she said, tilting her head. "Are you sure you're on the right jet?" Manny blinked, polite but confused. "Yes, I believe so. Charter to LA. Kayla frowned slightly. "This flight is reserved for Solara executive passengers only. The manifest doesn't show anyone by your name." The assistant stepped forward. "Ma'am, Mr. Pacquiao's seat is confirmed." "I'll handle this, thank you." Kayla cut him off sharply. "Sir, please step aside. I'll need to verify your credentials." Passengers seated nearby, a pair of businessmen and a young influencer, exchanged glances. Phones tilted up. Someone started recording. Manny's voice stayed soft. "You can check. My team arranged this flight." Kayla folded her arms. "We can't just let anyone walk into private charters, sir. Security protocol." Her tone carried the kind of authority that comes when someone's too sure of their assumptions. The seconds stretched, awkward and heavy. One of the businessmen whispered, "Isn't that Manny Pacquiao?" But Kayla didn't even flinch. "I don't care who you think you are," she said, stepping closer. "If your name's not on the manifest, you'll have to deboard immediately." A soft gasp escaped from a passenger in the back. 2 minutes past scheduled takeoff, and the mood inside the world's quietest jet had just shifted from calm luxury to open tension. The silence in the cabin was starting to feel personal. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and high-end coffee. But what lingered most was embarrassment. Kayla kept her posture perfect, one manicured hand resting on her tablet as if it were a shield. She scrolled through the digital manifest again, deliberately slow, letting each swipe punctuate her disbelief. "See?" she said, turning the screen toward Manny's assistant. "No Pacquiao here. Maybe your client booked through the wrong agency." The assistant's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I personally confirmed this flight through Solara Aviation's VIP desk. If you just called it—" "I will call," Kayla interrupted. "After you step outside. We can't have unverified passengers on board." Manny, still standing quietly near the aisle, gave a small, patient sigh, the kind that comes from years in the public eye. "Miss," he said softly, "I'm not here to cause trouble. But this flight was arranged for me. My name might not be on your list because it was booked under my foundation." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "Right, foundation." Her tone dripped with sarcasm. "Sir, I've dealt with all kinds of people trying to hitch a free ride on corporate charters. So please, don't make this harder than it has to be." The words hung in the air, sharp enough to slice through whatever calm remained. Across the aisle, one of the businessmen, a Filipino tech investor, and quietly muttered, "She doesn't know who she's talking to." His companion whispered back, "She's about to find out." Phones were now tilted more boldly. The influencer in seat 3A had started a live stream, captioning it, "When your flight attendant picks the wrong fight, Solara jet drama." By now, the cabin had an audience of thousands, though Kayla hadn't noticed. She was too busy trying to assert control. "Ma'am," the assistant said again, struggling to keep his composure, "please call your operations desk before you make a scene." Kayla's face tightened. "A scene? I'm doing my job. What you're doing is obstructing safety procedures." She stepped closer to Manny, her voice rising just enough to echo against the cabin walls. "Sir, I need you to step off this aircraft now." That last word, "now," snapped something in the room. Manny looked up, finally meeting her eyes. There was no anger in his face, just an almost painful calm. He spoke with the same voice he'd used in post-fight interviews, the one that could silence a room without effort. "You think I don't belong here?" he asked simply. Kayla blinked, caught off guard. I'm following protocol. Protocol, Manny repeated quietly as if testing the word's weight. Then follow all of it. Check who booked this jet. Check who paid for this flight. His tone was polite, but it hit differently, controlled, confident. Commanding without raising a single decibel. The livestream comments were blowing up now. Is that Manny Pacquiao? OMG, she's finished. Wait till she finds out whose jet this actually is. Kayla straightened, trying to regain footing. Sir, this plane belongs to Solara Aviation Group, a private company. You don't just book this kind of flight through a phone call. Manny nodded once, slow. Yes, he said, I know. That company belongs to a good friend of mine. Kayla scoffed. Of course it does. She turned toward the cockpit. Captain, we're removing this passenger before departure. But before she could take a step, a calm, measured voice came through the intercom. Cabin crew, stand by. There's been a change in protocol. Stay exactly where you are. Every head turned. The captain emerged from the cockpit, his expression tight with confusion. He held his headset slightly away from his ear, listening. Then his voice lowered, almost reverent. Kayla, I just got a call from corporate operations. The owner of Solara Aviation is on the line. She's requesting to speak with you directly. Kayla blinked. The owner? She never calls cabin crew. Apparently, the captain said, glancing uneasily toward Manny. She's been watching this entire exchange. The color drained from Kayla's face. For the first time since boarding, her confidence faltered. Well, watching how? The captain turned his tablet around. A live security feed from the cabin camera displayed on screen. A woman's face appeared on the split monitor, poised, composed, and unmistakably in control. Good morning, crew, the voice said smoothly. This is Dr. Cassandra Reyes, CEO and founder of Solara Aviation Group. I've just been informed there's a misunderstanding happening aboard my aircraft. Every passenger froze. The businessmen exchanged wide-eyed looks. The livestream's comment count hit 25,000. Manny just exhaled slowly, calm as ever. Dr. Reyes's voice sharpened slightly. Kayla, before you speak, I want to confirm something. The gentleman you're questioning, is he Mr. Manny Pacquiao? Kayla swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Then you may want to check your attitude, Reyes said evenly. Because Mr. Pacquiao isn't just a guest. He's the reason that jet you're standing in exists in the first place. Kayla blinked, eyes darting to Manny. I don't understand. You will, Reyes replied. Because the man you just tried to deboard helped fund this very company when it was nothing but an idea. The cabin went utterly silent. Even the livestream chat froze for half a second, before exploding again. 5 minutes past scheduled takeoff, and everything Kayla thought she knew about power, respect and authority had just flipped mid-air. Kayla's grip on her tablet loosened, her perfectly neutral flight attendant expression cracking into something raw and uncertain. The cabin's hum, the air vents, the faint beeping from the galley, felt thunderous against the silence that had fallen over everyone. Ma'am, Kayla stammered, voice trembling just slightly. I didn't realize. Dr. Cassandra Reyes cut in smoothly through the intercom. That's the point, Kayla, you didn't realize. And that's the problem with certain kinds of power. People use it before they understand who's watching. The passengers shifted uneasily. Every eye was locked on the sleek tablet screen displaying Dr. Reyes's calm, poised face. She was in her office, glass walls, skyline view, an aviation model sitting behind her on the shelf. Every part of her radiated authority. I built Solara Aviation to serve people with dignity, she continued. Every client, every crew member, every person who steps on our aircraft deserves respect. What I've just watched is the opposite of that. Kayla swallowed hard, fighting to find her voice. Dr. Reyes, with all due respect, I was just enforcing security protocol. No, Reyes interrupted gently but firmly. You were enforcing assumption. You saw a passenger who didn't fit your mental picture of a billionaire client, and you made a decision based on that picture. Tell me, Kayla, would you have questioned him if he walked in wearing a tailored suit instead of a training jacket? The question hit like turbulence. Kayla opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Manny stayed silent, still seated now, hands folded loosely. His calm wasn't smugness. It was that kind of quiet dignity that makes everyone else feel exposed. The live stream numbers had doubled, 50,000 viewers and climbing. Comments poured in. This CEO just ended her. Manny's face says everything. Power handled with grace, this is how it's done. Captain Harris cleared his throat carefully. Dr. Reyes, how would you like to proceed? First, Reyes said, her tone shifting from composed to commanding, Mr. Pacquiao and his team are to be treated as honored guests. Full discretion, maximum comfort. Second, she looked straight into the camera. Kayla Williams is relieved of her duties effective immediately. Kayla froze. Ma'am, please, Reyes didn't raise her voice, but her words landed like hammer strikes. You're suspended for discriminatory conduct and unprofessional behavior aboard a private charter. Security will meet you at the terminal upon return. There was no anger in her tone, just resolution. The captain nodded solemnly. Understood. Reyes continued, turning to Manny through the feed. Mr. Pacquiao, I want to extend my sincerest apologies. This company would not exist without your early investment. You believed in Solara when others didn't. I am personally embarrassed this happened aboard your own aircraft. Manny nodded slowly. Thank you, Cassandra. I appreciate that. I wasn't angry, only disappointed. People should learn not to judge by appearance. That humility made the whole cabin lean in. The man could have destroyed her with a word, yet he chose grace. Exactly, Reyes said. And that's why this moment will mean something. Not just to us, but to everyone watching. Kayla's face had gone pale. Her fellow attendant whispered softly, Kay, you need to sit down. But Kayla couldn't move. She was frozen between shame and disbelief. Then Reyes continued, voice cool but deliberate. Before I end this call, I'm implementing 3 immediate actions. 1. Comprehensive retraining for all Solara aviation crew in cultural sensitivity and bias awareness. 2. A zero-tolerance policy for passenger humiliation or unauthorized recordings. And 3. Public acknowledgement of this incident and our responsibility to fix it. The captain gave a quiet nod. We'll make sure it's handled immediately, ma'am. Reyes's expression softened, but her tone still carried steel. Kayla, I'm not here to humiliate you. You'll have a chance to reflect and learn. But accountability begins when we admit what we did wrong. Kayla's eyes welled, but she nodded. Yes, ma'am. Manny finally stood up, the soft hum of the engines filling the pause. Dr. Reyes, he said, voice gentle but steady. I don't want anyone fired on my behalf. But I agree, change needs to happen. Respect should be for everyone, not just names people recognize. Reyes smiled faintly. And that, Manny, is why you're still the champion. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. No, ma'am. I just don't like seeing anyone lose their job over pride. Then let's make this a lesson, not a punishment, Reyes replied.
Kayla, you'll remain on leave until you complete a mandatory inclusion program.
If you pass with distinction, I'll personally reinstate you. Kayla looked stunned, whispering, Thank you. Manny turned to the other passengers. Let's give her that chance, he said simply. The quiet authority in his tone reminded everyone exactly who he was. A fighter who had lost and learned, risen and respected. The businessman in seat 2C spoke up. Sir, if I may, this was eye-opening. People like me, we travel with assumptions. I think we all learned something today. Manny smiled faintly. That's how the world changes, we one flight at a time. Reyes's voice came again, calm and clear. Well said, Manny. Captain, once this call ends, please proceed with departure. And make sure my team sends an official apology to Mr. Pacquiao's foundation within the hour. Yes, ma'am, Harris replied. The video feed flickered out, leaving behind a hum of quiet awe. The tension that had filled the air moments ago dissolved into something else. Respect. Kayla finally sat down, shoulders trembling. The other attendant placed a reassuring hand on her back. Manny walked over and offered her a small bottle of water. Drink, he said softly. You'll need it. Kayla hesitated, then nodded, her eyes wet. I'm so sorry, sir. I know, Manny replied gently. Just learn from it. The engines roared to life. The plane began taxiing down the runway, but this time the atmosphere was transformed. What had started as confrontation had become a lesson in grace, accountability, and quiet power. As the jet lifted into the sky, the livestream comments filled with praise, reflection and admiration, not for drama, but for dignity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about leadership. Manny Pacquiao showing the world how champions really fight. Power doesn't shout. It speaks softly and changes everything. 8 minutes past takeoff, and the world had just watched a masterclass in humility and justice unfold at 30,000 feet by the time the jet leveled at cruising altitude. The story had already left the cabin. It was everywhere. Hashtags were multiplying like wildfire across every platform. Your Pacquiao plane, your Graysat 3,000 feet. There's Solara scandal. Clips from the livestream were being reposted faster than the flight's Wi-Fi could buffer. In Manila, news anchors were interrupting scheduled programs to discuss the Pacquiao jet incident. In New York, corporate analysts were dissecting how Solara Aviation's brand had just faced, and possibly mastered, its biggest PR storm. Inside the aircraft, though, calm had returned. The cabin lights had dimmed to a gentle gold. Manny sat back in his seat, phone buzzing every few seconds. Messages from reporters, sponsors, even politicians flooded in. He ignored them all. "Sir," his assistant whispered, showing him a headline on his tablet. "Boxing legend teaches a masterclass in respect at 30,000 feet. Manny smiled faintly. "Let them talk," he said. "What matters is what we learned." Across the aisle, Kayla sat quietly, still processing the wreckage of her choices. The adrenaline had long faded, replaced by the dull ache of embarrassment. She kept replaying the moment Dr. Reyes appeared on the screen. That sudden drop in her stomach when she realized the man she'd dismissed owned more of her world than she'd ever imagined. "Marcus." The other attendant broke the silence gently. "You okay?" Kayla nodded, voice barely audible. "I thought I was doing my job." "Maybe you were," he said. "But the job's supposed to serve people, not judge them." She let out a shaky breath. "Guess I forgot that." Down on the ground, Solara Aviation headquarters was in controlled chaos. Phones rang nonstop. Media teams were working on double time. Dr. Cassandra Reyes stood at the center of her glass-walled office, hands folded, completely still. Her chief communications officer, Lydia Chen, looked up from a stack of drafted statements. "Cassandra, the footage has over 6 million views in 2 hours. Every outlet's calling for comment." Reyes nodded slowly. "Then let's give them one, but we do it on our terms." Lydia hesitated. "You want to lead with the apology?" But amid the applause, there was another story brewing, that of Kayla, the flight attendant who'd caused the firestorm. Reporters tried to track her down for comment, but she refused every interview. She was focused on something else: learning. Kayla spent her days shadowing empathy trainers, reading books on unconscious bias, and meeting passengers from different backgrounds. She volunteered for Solara's new Respect in Service initiative, even offering to film a short training video about her experience. When it released, the video went viral again, but this time for all the right reasons. She looked straight into the camera and said, "I thought professionalism meant control. But real professionalism means compassion. You don't lose authority by showing respect. You earn it." Under the clip, Manny commented simply, "That's the lesson I wanted everyone to hear." Well said. It was liked over 10 million times. Solara Aviation wasn't the only company paying attention. Within a week, 5 other private jet operators announced new anti-bias protocols. Airline executives invited Manny to speak at an industry summit on humanity and hospitality. He accepted, reluctantly at first. "I'm a boxer," he said to his team, "not a motivational speaker." But Dr. Reyes convinced him otherwise. "You've already spoken louder than any microphone," she told him. "Now the world just needs to hear why." The conference hall in Geneva was packed. CEOs, journalists, and government officials filled every seat. Cameras rolled as Manny stepped to the podium. No entourage, no pretense, just his quiet authority. He began slowly, in that soft Filipino cadence that carried more conviction than thunder ever could. "When you travel a lot, you see the world's beauty, and its pride," he said. "But pride can make people forget to see each other." The flight that changed everything wasn't about one mistake. It was about a system that forgot humility. He paused, scanning the audience. Power doesn't mean control. It means responsibility. The room fell completely silent. Even the translators seemed to stop breathing. When he finished, the crowd stood, a full standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. And in that moment, the boxer who'd once fought for belts had become a symbol for something far greater: the fight for respect itself. The story still rippled outward. A luxury airline in Dubai implemented empathy captains, specialists on every flight trained to mediate customer service conflicts with grace. A startup in Singapore launched an AI tool that monitored tone in airline communications to detect bias patterns. Travel influencers began promoting respect tourism, urging followers to treat crew, staff, and service workers with kindness. And in the Philippines, the Pacquiao Foundation for Human Dignity was born. Its first project, scholarships for hospitality workers from underprivileged backgrounds. Dr. Reyes joined the board. Kayla volunteered as its first program instructor. The same jet that had once hosted chaos now carried something new: legacy. Manny was back on board, en route to a charity event. Kayla handed him a warm towel with a smile that was no longer rehearsed. "Welcome back, sir," she said. "Feels like home again," he replied. He glanced out the window as the plane climbed through the clouds. Below, the world that had once judged and speculated now watched and learned. What began as a viral embarrassment had evolved into a movement, a reminder that power handled with humility can change institutions, not just headlines. That evening, an anchor on international news closed her segment with words that perfectly captured what everyone felt. In a time when outrage spreads faster than truth, Manny Pacquiao showed the world another way: the power of calm accountability. The flight that almost divided people ended up reminding us of our shared humanity. In a Manila cafe, a group of young aviation students watched that clip. One of them, a shy trainee flight attendant, whispered, "I want to work for a company like that someday." Her classmate smiled. "Then learn to see people before you see their status." The movement kept growing, not because of outrage, but because of empathy. And as the world replayed that 5-minute altercation over and over, what stuck wasn't the mistake, but the message. You don't need to raise your voice to raise the standard. 6 months can change a lot: a company, a person, even a culture. For Solara Aviation, those 6 months became a blueprint for transformation. The name that had once been dragged through headlines for arrogance was now appearing in leadership case studies at Harvard and Stanford. The title of one read, "From Scandal to Standard: How Solara Rebuilt Trust at 30,000 Feet." But behind the glossy reports and clean statistics, it was people, not policy, that made the real difference. The terminal shimmered in the humid sunrise. A line of journalists waited near Gate 12 for a familiar face. When Manny Pacquiao arrived, they erupted into polite chaos. Flashbulbs popped, microphones stretched forward. "Manny, is it true you're partnering with Solara for a global campaign? Sir, how did the flight incident affect your foundation? Are you still in touch with the attendant who—" He smiled gently, cutting through the noise without raising his voice. "Good morning, everyone. Let's not talk about the past. Let's talk about progress." The reporters quieted. They always did with him. Inside the VIP lounge, Dr. Cassandra Reyes was waiting. She stood as Manny approached, offering a firm handshake that had the weight of mutual respect now, not apology. "Still flying high, I see," Manny said, smiling. "Trying to," she replied, "and learning every day. You ready for this campaign?" He nodded. "As long as it's about people, not profit." "It is," she said. "We're calling it Wings of Respect. We'll take the message to airports around the world that dignity should fly first class every time." He grinned. "Catchy. You're learning from the best PR team in the world." "Actually," she said, lowering her voice, "we're learning from you." Kayla stood in front of a room full of new recruits, 30 bright-eyed trainees in crisp uniforms. A year ago, she would have stood there armed with rules and checklists. Today, she stood with something better: perspective. On the screen, behind her was a photo, the jet mid-flight, sunlight streaming through the window. "This," she began, "was where I learned the hardest lesson of my career. I forgot that service is not about hierarchy. It's about humanity." The room was silent, listening. She continued, "You'll meet celebrities, executives, royalty even. But never forget, titles fly off at 30,000 feet. What's left is just people, and that's who you serve." When she finished, the class clapped. Not the polite kind, but the real kind, the kind that meant something. In the back of the room, Dr. Reyes watched quietly, a proud half-smile on her face. Kayla caught her eye, and they exchanged a look that said, "We did it." The Wings of Respect campaign launched with quiet elegance. Billboards at major airports showed simple, striking images. Flight attendants of every background smiling side by side. Passengers of all kinds shaking hands mid-aisle. At the bottom, "Luxury isn't silence, it's understanding. Solara Aviation X Pacquiao Foundation." The internet loved it, not because it was flashy, but because it felt real. The same humility that turned a scandal into a movement was now shaping how people talked about air travel itself. One headline read, "When a punch could have ended it, he chose patience instead." One humid evening, Manny hosted a private dinner for his foundation and Solara's leadership team. The guest list included Kayla, Reyes, and several scholarship students from the new hospitality program. Kayla sat between two students, both from small towns in the Visayas region. They looked nervous, starstruck even. "You don't have to be perfect," she told them softly. "You just have to be kind. That's what this whole journey taught me." Dr. Reyes raised her glass. "To second chances and to people brave enough to take them." Manny lifted his own. "And to change that starts with one mistake, but ends with a better world." Glasses clinked. Laughter rose. It wasn't just celebration. It was closure. The anchor leaned forward. "Mr. Pacquiao, do you realize your story changed global aviation policy?" Manny chuckled. "I didn't set out to change anything. I just didn't want to fight anger with anger." "And yet you did fight, just differently." He smiled. "Sometimes the quiet fight lasts longer." 2 weeks later, Solara Aviation was awarded the Global Integrity and Service Award, the first of its kind. When Dr. Reyes walked on stage to accept it, she surprised everyone by calling Kayla up to join her. "This woman," she said, gesturing to Kayla, "reminded us that mistakes don't end you. They start you over." The crowd stood, applauding. Manny, seated in the front row, rose too, clapping slowly, proudly. Afterward, when the press swarmed her, Kayla said only one line. "It took me one bad moment to lose my confidence and then one kind man to help me find it again." The same Gulfstream G700 soared quietly through night skies bound for another humanitarian trip. Manny sat by the window, a soft glow from the city lights below painting his reflection on the glass. Kayla approached with tea. "Everything comfortable, sir?" He nodded. "Very. You're doing great work." "Thanks to you," she said. He looked up, smiling. "No thanks to what you chose to do next," she laughed lightly, retreating to her post. The cabin was calm, the air peaceful, a far cry from what it had once been. Manny closed his eyes, thinking of how far they'd all come. 6 months ago, a misunderstanding had nearly ruined careers. Now it had rewritten an entire industry's definition of respect. As the jet sliced through the clouds, a line from an old interview echoed in his mind. "You don't need to raise your voice to raise the standard." He smiled. The lesson had traveled farther than any flight ever could. 1 year had passed since that turbulent flight, the one that had started as a misunderstanding and ended as a movement. The world had moved on, but the echoes of that moment had not faded. They had evolved into training programs, new aviation laws, and a cultural reset that rippled far beyond the sky. The ballroom at the Manila Grand Convention Center glittered with soft gold light. Executives, journalists, flight attendants, and students filled the hall for the Wings of Respect Anniversary Gala, an event co-hosted by the Pacquiao Foundation and Solara Aviation. At the center of it all stood Dr. Cassandra Reyes, dignified in a simple ivory gown. No more sharp suits, no more PR armor, just calm, real confidence. On stage, a large screen played highlights from the past year. New Solara recruits smiling in training sessions, clips from empathy workshops, community outreach events in small Philippine airports, and glimpses of Manny himself speaking to young athletes about dignity, not dominance. As the applause faded, Reyes took the podium. "A year ago, this company faced its hardest test. We failed, publicly, painfully. But we learned that failure isn't fatal when it leads to reform. Today we don't celebrate perfection. We celebrate progress." The room erupted into applause. It wasn't the kind of applause people gave for a corporate speech. It was human, heartfelt, hopeful. Kayla sat at a table near the back, beside some of the new recruits she now mentored. She watched Reyes speak, remembering how far she had come from that humiliating day, how one rash mistake had nearly erased her career. Now, she was the face of Solara's Empathy in Flight program. Her story had been turned into training material, not as punishment but as proof of growth. The young recruit next to her whispered, "Is it true you got fired and then rehired?" Kayla smiled softly. "Not rehired, redefined. When Manny took the stage, the crowd stood immediately. He looked out over the audience, the flight attendants, executives, journalists, students, and smiled with that calm warmth he was known for. I've spent my whole life fighting, in the ring, in politics, for my people. But what I learned that day on the jet," he said, pausing as cameras clicked, "is that sometimes the strongest punch is the one you don't throw." The crowd laughed softly, but his tone stayed gentle. "That day taught me that respect is not a luxury. It's a right. And dignity is not something you earn from titles. It's something you give, freely, to everyone." The applause rose again, filling the room like a wave. A short film played next. A one-year retrospective produced by Solara and the Pacquiao Foundation. The narrator's voice echoed over footage of airports and aircraft. In 1 year, passenger discrimination reports across Southeast Asia dropped by 61%. 17 airlines adopted the Solara standard, a new global protocol for dignity in air travel, and over 400,000 employees completed empathy certification training. The screen faded to black with the words, "One flight changed everything." When the lights came back up, even seasoned reporters were wiping their eyes. Later that evening, on the rooftop terrace overlooking Manila Bay, Manny stood quietly beside Dr. Reyes. The city lights shimmered below, their reflections trembling in the dark water. "It's strange," she said. "You can prepare your whole life for leadership, but sometimes it takes one mistake to teach you what it really means." Manny nodded. "Mistakes are teachers in disguise. The lesson depends on whether you listen." They stood in companionable silence for a while, the warm night wind carrying the faint hum of traffic below. Reyes turned to him. "You know, you could have destroyed us that day and nobody would have blamed you." He smiled. "That's not who I am. I've fought enough battles. Now I'd rather build bridges." She nodded, understanding. "And you did." Kayla walked through a local aviation school where she had volunteered to teach part-time. On the whiteboard behind her, written in bold blue letters, was the slogan she'd helped create, "Respect takes flight." She pointed to it, addressing her students, a mix of aspiring flight attendants, pilots and ground staff. "Remember," she said, "what happened to me could happen to anyone. But what matters is what you do next. Don't let pride crash your humanity." The students listened intently. For them, she wasn't just a teacher. She was proof that redemption was real. The Washington Protocol from the Kesha. Washington's story had inspired aviation worldwide, and the Solara standard became its Asian counterpart. Governments across ASEAN adopted new anti-discrimination aviation regulations. Other industries, hospitality, tourism, even law enforcement, began consulting Solara's training framework. Manny's foundation opened a new center for human dignity and service in Taguig, offering scholarships to young Filipinos pursuing aviation careers. The lobby displayed a plaque that read, "One moment of humility can transform an entire system." Monsieur Pacquiao, a year to the day after the incident, Manny was once again on his jet, this time headed to Geneva for a UN conference on human rights in travel. As the engines hummed softly, Kayla approached with tea. "Same order, sir. Green tea, honey, no sugar," he smiled. "You remembered?" "I never forget lessons learned the hard way," she replied. They both chuckled quietly. Looking out the window, Manny saw the ocean stretch endlessly below, calm, vast, reflective. He thought of that first flight, the humiliation, the tension, the choice to respond with patience instead of anger, and how that one choice had rewritten countless others. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes grace flies higher than power." As the plane pierced through the clouds, sunlight spilled across the cabin, golden, warm, peaceful. It wasn't just another flight. It was a journey that had started with pride and ended with purpose, the story of a man who refused to fight back, and a company that learned to stand taller because of it. And like all great stories of quiet strength, it didn't end with applause. It ended with change. Have you ever faced a moment where humility changed the outcome? Share your story below, because respect isn't about who's strongest. It's about who chooses to stay human when it's hardest. Subscribe for more stories of quiet power, second chances, and dignity in action, because sometimes the smallest gesture can lift an entire world.